Yeah, I know. Yet another video of us dunking on non-car people, but don't worry, I promise this one's going to be a lot of fun. And if you are one of those non-car enthusiasts, or even a car enthusiast who's just new, you might learn something new as well as things that you shouldn't say, because these legitimately are 5 car parts that people still think are relevant, but I'm not gonna lie to you, are either out of use, haven't been in use, or they have better terms that have since succeeded them. So we'll get into the first entry and you're gonna see what I mean. By the way, excuse my voice, it sounds really bad because having a lot of seasonal allergies right now. Anyways, carburetors. Carburetors is the word I hear a lot of Twitch streamers and a lot of YouTubers constantly say whenever they play games like Grand Theft Auto or any racing game or any open world game that features cars, and they're like, oh, let's go kickstart that carburetor, or let's get in this car and fix up the carburetor, or let's crank up that carburetor. They're using a word for something that hasn't been prevalent in such a long time that basically doesn't even exist in modern cars. So first off, carburetors, the last one to ever be used in a mass production vehicle was in the 90s. They haven't been actively used since the early 80s, and they hit their highest prevalency in the 60s and 70s. Now, the reason we don't use them anymore is because fuel injected engines are just way better from a horsepower standpoint, from a fuel economy standpoint, and from an EPA standpoint. There's nothing wrong with carbureted engines. Please don't interpret this as that's what I'm trying to say. It's just the fact that there's something truly belonging to the past. If you have a classic car that still has a carbureted engine and you're trying to just keep it a collector's car, that's fine. But if you have a modern day car, you should not go out of your way to swap back to a carburetor. Which brings me to the issue with whenever I hear non-car people use this word on video games. For the love of God, guys, this is not a word that you use in place of an engine. A lot of people, like streamers especially, they use this word to try to sound smart. Like they're like, oh, I can't actually name a part of a car, so I'm gonna use this part of a car because it's the only part I can name. Ooh, carburetors, because it has the word car in it. And they think they're sounding smarter by trying to name a part of a car, when in actuality they sound dumber because they're using a part of a car that, like I said, isn't used anymore and hasn't been used actively in basically half a century. And the last few remaining prevalency of it being used, most of those streamers probably still weren't even born. So it is not a quirky, cute car part to make yourself sound smart because, like I said, it's been out of use for so long. It is also not a substitute to an engine. It is a component for an engine. In the same way that a fuel injected engine is a thing, a carbureted engine is a thing. You do not have a carburetor without an engine. You do not have fuel injection without an engine. You would just be injecting fuel into the ground. So the next car part I want to talk about, it's still relevant, but it's, again, this is a word, or rather phrase, that is losing relevancy because it's not a bragging right anymore, and I'm gonna say it, alloy wheels. So a lot of people back in the past, whenever they were trying to upsell a car or talk about how premium a car was, they'd be like, my car has alloy wheels. Ooh, alloy. The amount of people on my Noob's Guide to Wheel series are like, why didn't you talk about alloy wheels? Those are the greatest thing. My salesman told me that I have these super cool alloy wheels when I bought my car. They're not that cool. In fact, most alloy wheels, because now a lot of them are cheaply produced in China, it's actually not something you want to be upsold on anymore. So I'm just going to talk about the definition of alloy. Alloy literally means a mix of metals. But this isn't some secret production process. A lot of people have been able to mimic it, and as people were able to mass produce it more and more, a lot of places around the world are able to produce alloy wheels. Because again, alloy doesn't necessarily mean good, it just means a mix of metals. Yes, mixing metals can result in a stronger metal, but it can also result in weaker metals. And that's why alloy wheels aren't a bragging point anymore, because there are a ton of gravity cast alloy wheels, and even pressure cast, which is the most wheels, by the way, are pressure cast. Watch my wheels guide videos and you'll understand that how the wheel is made and how the metal is actually properly pressurized and forged and whatnot is more important than the metal used. For any video game nerds out there, I'll use a blacksmithing example. Let's say you have the greatest metal in game. If you don't forge that sword and you just swing the raw metal around after hammering it, do you think that's going to be as effective as a forged sword, or a sword that's been constantly pressurized instead of one that's just been poured into a mold and then smacked a bit and then now you go fighting with it? Obviously the forged sword, or the sword that's been properly pressurized over and over instead of just merely being poured into a mold, they're going to be stronger than the one that's just in a mold. The same goes true for wheels. Alloy wheels that have just been poured into a mold held by gravity and aren't repressurized aren't as strong as wheels that have been pressurized. They're especially not as strong as alloy that has been forged or flow formed. So there's many different forging techniques and there's many different parts of the wheel you can forge. Just because you have a wheel that is made of alloy is not a bragging right, and especially since alloy wheels have been massively replicated and cheaply and poorly produced as of recent, it is actually, in my opinion, oftentimes worse to get alloy wheels. If you're not buying from a reputable manufacturer, you are truly better off on your OEM wheels, original equipment manufacturer, what came on your car, especially if they're just a normal set of steelies. Now, I'm gonna clarify one more thing. Someone's probably going to comment, well, an alloy wheel, even though it's a mixture of metal, is likely still stronger than my current plastic wheels, because these cheap plastic wheels I have from factory are really fragile and blah blah blah. And let me just stop you right there. And by the way, I hear this a lot. I hear a lot of people say, well, I don't want plastic wheels. No car uses plastic wheels. No full-sized car, at least. Yes, some go-karts use them, some lawnmowers use them, but your full-sized 4,000-pound vehicle is not driving on plastic wheels. You are driving on steel wheels, also known as steelies. What you think is making it plastic is when you knock on it, you do indeed feel plastic. That is called its hubcap or center cap or whatever you want to call it. That hub that just sits, it's like a cap for your wheel, right? That's why they're called caps. That sits on top of your steely, because this is what steelies look like. Because of how, I guess, derpy they look, a lot of manufacturers put these on them, these plastic caps on them. That is what you're knocking on. That's the plastic you're knocking on. And can you blame them for putting them on your steel wheels when most non-car people think that steel wheels are ugly, so they would rather see spokes? Therefore, they have these plastic spokes in a cap shape laid over on top of their steel wheel. The actual wheel itself, other than the cap, is not freaking plastic. It is indeed still metal. Yeah, again, steel is a lot heavier than aluminum, but as I've mentioned, most alloy wheels are a mix. If you actually have a pure forged aluminum wheel, it's gonna be a great wheel, but if you have a cheaply gravity cast alloy wheel, you're better off staying on your steelies. Overusing the word paint. So, for example, chrome paint, gold paint, camo paint, anime paint. So paint itself is not irrelevant, but a lot of non-car people for some reason still think everyone still paints everything onto cars. We don't. Most of it is now vinyl wrap from printers, and I've met a lot of stubborn people online who still tell me that painting should be superior in these circumstances, and I'm about to break down why they aren't. So I'm going to tell you what paint is really great at. Paint is de facto unbeatable when it comes to choosing a new solid base color. If you want to turn a car blue into a yellow car, you should paint it, because painting is permanent. Painting lasts a much longer time. Painting is much easier to take care of than a wrap. It has a way less maintenance. It also won't peel after a few years, so in between the fenders, paint's just gonna look better too. Overall, paint's just gonna look better because it doesn't stretch and bubble and blah blah blah. So when it comes to just solid color changes, paint is going to be the best option still. Vinyl wrap does have one very superior aspect to painting, which is that it's very good with fine details and very good at mimicking very, I guess, hard to mimic finishes. Chrome and gold paint has indeed been a thing in the past, but they cost tens, 20s, even hundreds of thousands of dollars, depending on the quality of gold or silver used. A vinyl wrap of gold or chrome or silver is only going to cost from $4,000 to maybe $10,000, and it's going to look, same thing with camo patterns. Camo patterns, if you were to paint them on a car, requires tons of different paint colors, and then you have to constantly splotch over and layer over each paint layer until you achieve the camo look. Wrap, you can just run it through a printer with the pre-vectored camo design that you want, and then the printer will then just make the camo pattern and just use all the different ink colors it needs to use, and then it's put into the freaking vinyl that you then just wrap your car with. And the same logic it goes with anime prints or really anything of that sort. So yes, people have painted things in the past. It's referred to as airbrushing, and airbrushing is a really cool art. And in my opinion though, airbrushing on cars has been getting phased out by vinyl work. Really expensive, and it still achieves a somewhat decent look, but it has what I call a very fuzzy feel to it, because again, it's paint. It's usually done through layering tons of stencils over one another. Also, sorry if it sounds like I'm being sarcastic and exaggerating certain words and talking down to people like your 5-year-olds. That's not what's happening. My voice still sucks. Like, I have to exaggerate words to enunciate them better, so just want to throw that out there if someone's commenting that I sound rude right now. I'm genuinely not trying to sound that way. I apologize, but But guess what happens when you have a design, like an airbrush design, and it gets in an accident and one of those panels is gone? You're done for. The rest of your design is just gonna look stupid now because you cannot repaint that design. I guess you could, but it will never, ever, 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 ever match your base design and what it was supposed to be. And that's one of the huge weaknesses of airbrushing compared to printing. If any of your panels or any of the vinyl gets damaged, because remember, you don't have to get in an accident. Maybe someone keyed your car or someone scratched your car, or you yourself accidentally got micro scratches on it because you used something too abrasive when you detailed it. For whatever reason, if you mess up your airbrush design, you are game over. You are done with. If you mess up a vinyl design, you just run it back through the printer. Because you have the exact file. This goes back to the handmade versus factory argument. Back in the day, hand making something resulted in better results, but as robots became laser precise, human error was eliminated. There's too much human error involved in painting a design, much less having to repaint the design when the design is messed up, versus a robot which doesn't make a mistake in the first place and will continue not to make mistakes even when you yourself get involved in mistakes. If you need a new panel, it can print the exact design exactly down to the pixel where your previous design left off, and you could put that panel with that wrap back on your car and it looked like nothing happened. Vinyl wrapping designs, when it comes to designs, that's why it's always going to be superior to paint, because paint is just for solid base colors where it's very easy to match them even in situations of accidents, and paint is such a long lasting thing that it should always be your base. I don't recommend wrapping over primer, you should paint over primer. Antennas. So sometimes I get non-car people or friends who, whenever I drive around, who look at my vortex generators and go, why does your car have 9 small antennas? And to anyone who owns like a Subaru WRX or a Mitsubishi Evo, you probably also get that question, or Honda Type Rs, I forgot they have them too, where they'll be like, why do you guys have all these antennas on your hatch? Those aren't antennas, they're vortex generators. For what vortex generators are, I'm just gonna link to another my video because this video is already taking a lot longer than I thought. What they're confusing them as are shark fin antennas. So shark fin antennas are basically a smaller, like sleeker, cooler looking antenna, because obviously old school car antennas, which were these metal rods that you could pull up and down, or some of them were guarded with polymer and plastic, so they would be a bit chunkier and thicker. And the point is, you know, a lot of cars don't use metal antennas, and heck, most of them don't even use shark fin antennas either. If you wonder where the antenna is on the Corvette, it's actually embedded inside the rear bumper, and it's just like a little black box assembly that just picks up radio waves like that. And a lot of cars do that these days. They just hide the radio capability. They don't even need an external shark fin anymore either. The final entry in this video are throttle/brake cables. We're actually going to just focus on brake cables. So I'm going to say this right now. I'm going to preface this for anyone who's about to say, actually, these are still relevant. Yes, I'm aware that most handbrakes, as in like an e-brake, emergency brake, or haha, funny drifting go burr brake, that does still use a brake cable. But look, what I'm trying to say is that we're going to talk about your main braking system for this entry, okay? So we're going to forget about handbrakes, even though I just told you about them. Just your regular front and rear brakes, you know? Your main brake system uses brake lines because they're a hydraulic system that needs to have fluid run through them, and they have a master cylinder to which the fluid returns as well as comes from. Actual throttle cables and brake cables are not fluid based, because duh, that's why they're called cables and not lines. And these physical cables require a lot of physical force to generate friction, and that is why they haven't been used in our standard brakes in almost a century at this point, as in 1920s and 1930s. And that is because they are extremely heavy and very inconvenient to use, because I told you that when you push your brake pedal, you have to generate a lot of force in order to get the friction going. Whereas it was a lot easier to just use hydraulic brakes, not just for convenience sake, but also for actually applying it to your brakes, because hydraulic brakes gave you much better reaction times because you can push it a lot softer. More importantly, when they did get pushed, they actually reacted for the vehicle itself much faster, so the car didn't need to brake as soon. You could actually brake last second in case of an emergency, in case someone runs out in front of you, in case another car pulls out in front of you. They're overall just safer. Anyways, that's gonna be it for this video. Thank you so much for watching. If you love cars and car content, make sure to subscribe for more. Other than that though, see y'all next time. Blade Angel out.